We would be starting the next panel, and may I request Mr. Deepak Maheshwari to come up on stage. He would be moderating this session. Along with him, we have Mr. Vinit Goenka, Amit Dubey, and Shailendra Vikram Singh. Unfortunately, this is going to be a manel because Napinai is stuck in the court. So she's running a bit late.
Good afternoon, and may I request you all to please take your seats. So in this session, we are going to discuss about the 4 attributes that have been talked often about: the open, trusted, safe, and accountable cyberspace. But before we get into this particular session, I just want to react briefly to the some of the discussions in the previous session. One was, thanks to Mrs. Aruna Sharma, she did mention about all the 3 IT acts, by the way, if you did not notice. So, of course, we are talking about Information Technology Act, which Mr. Satyanarayana also mentioned quite a lot, 2000. There were also, of course, talk about the Indian Telegraphy Act that Vakul had mentioned, 1885. And there's also something else with which many of us were busy till March, I would say, and again, we'll get busy till July, which is the Income Tax Act, another IT Act. And so that was one thing. But more importantly, 25 years back, 1998, the government had come out with 2 different legislative drafts before IT Act came. Before it was even called Information Technology Bill 1999, the earlier bills were called E-Commerce Act and E-Commerce Support Act, 1998. So both of them were very much there. So जब लोग बोलते हैं ना e-commerce अभी 5-10 साल से हो रहा है, तो वो सब गलत बोल रहे हैं. क्योंकि e-commerce in this country has been happening at least since 1998 that I am aware. हो सकता है उससे भी थोड़ा पहले से हो रही हो. Law उसके बाद आया. Second thing is, yes, IT Act 2000 came in 2000. That's fine. We also had the certain as a body, as an executive body in 2003, of course, in 2008 amendment, it became a statutory body. But Hindustan mein pehli internet blocking happened in January 1998. So even before the IT Act came. So what had happened, the government had, that time there was only one ISP in the country, VSNL, and they had blocked an internet telephony website. And somebody in Delhi had gone to Delhi High Court with a PIL. And the court granted an injunction because the court held that access to the information on VoIP is not illegal. What was against the terms and conditions of VSNL's terms and conditions at that point of time was usage of that internet telephony. But access to that information was not illegal, and that was the ground there. So another thing in terms of blocking, the way people think about blocking, so people should remember this also. Also, in July 2006, Dr. Gulchandra and I were both involved in that particular activity. So on 13th of July, the government had directed 17 URLs to be blocked. Some of the ISPs blocked the whole blogspot.com. It became a huge media thing. And ultimately, a week later, the government came out with a new direction, which basically said that ISPs are hereby directed to ensure that they block only the specific URL of web pages which they have been asked to block, and not the whole URL, and that's not the whole domain per se. That was the specific direction in July 2006. Of course, then subsequently we had the 2008 amendments and other things. So Ashish did mention about that legislative process takes a lot of time. So let me just remind about one particular aspect, which is about 2008 amendment itself. Something happened in a school in Delhi in December 2004, and because of that, there was an arrest, there was other things. And then in 2005, January, the government formed a committee under the chairmanship of then Secretary, Mr. Brijesh Kumar, committee of experts. They gave their report a few months later. That report fed into a new legislative draft. So in 2006, we had a new legislative draft, IT Amendment Bill 2006. It was referred to the standing committee. They gave their report a year later. Mr. Nikhil Kumar, who was a former police commissioner of Delhi, he was the chair of that committee. And in 2008, then we had the IT Amendment Act passed in December, and it was on 5th of February 2009 that the Act got notified, the Amendment Act got notified. So if you see from 2004 to 2009, just an amendment, even that took almost 5 years. So just to put things in perspective, that yes, I mean, the legislative process is such that it takes a lot of time. Mr. Satyanarayana and Dr. Gulshan Rai and many others in the previous session also talked a lot about federalism. So here one thing that I would say is that in our constitution, we have got 3 lists. So there's a union list, there's a state list, and there's a concurrent list. And as per the constitution, if something is not listed in any of these 3 lists, the residuary powers lie with the union government. However, I would say that IT has become almost like a default concurrent subject in this country, because much before the IT Act came, the state from which Mr. Satyanarayan and Mr. Chandrasekhar and many others came from, that cadre had sort of taken a leap, and they had come out with their own state IT policies much before even the central government came up with many of these things. So there are those type of aspects also which are playing, and I think today the situation is that more or less people have sort of accepted that equilibrium in some way. Some of the things, yes, even if they have been on the statute books, but that doesn't mean that they have actually been implemented. Let's just take one example, encryption. I mean, I've been dealing with encryption issues since 6th of August 1999, but it was on IT Act 2000, Section 84A. It says that the union government can notify the rules and frame the norms around encryption. There have been multiple discussions, multiple committees. In September 2015, we had even a draft encryption policy. And after, it came out on a Friday, and on Tuesday it was withdrawn, even before the time for the comments was up. But that's where it is. Vakul also did mention about that there was no Technology Act. Wrong. Because we did have an Indian Wireless Telegraphy Act in 1933. So after 1885, we did have laws related to technology. So that's another aspect. There have been a case, of course, he did mention about the Malkhana. So yes, a few years back, in almost 20 years back, we did have a case that somewhere the police had found evidence on a floppy disk. कुछ लोगों को पता होगा अभी भी floppy disk क्या होती है यहाँ पर. 8-10 लोग तो हैं ऐसे कम से कम इस रूम में, ज़्यादा नहीं है. तो floppy disk was, and this was, by the way, a 5 1/4 floppy disk, not 3.5 inch. Okay, and that floppy disk was taken. And typically, any document that had to be punched, so somebody had very promptly punched it and put in a file. Okay, so that's again a real thing which did happen in the country. So that's the type of background where we have, and of course, it was almost 20 years back we had this famous paper called "Code is the Law." So in the previous session also we did hear a little bit around that. So in this session we are going to use a slightly different format. So rather than asking each of the panelists for initial comments, etc., I want them to be a little bit more focused on some of the aspects. So one is we are having these 4 terms, let's say open, safe, trusted, and accountable. Okay, so these are the 4 terms, and of course there are many other ways in which one can talk about cyberspace. So about 3 minutes each, I would request all of you to sort of what according to you are the norms around, let's say, open, safe, trusted, and accountable. So let me start with Shailendra.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Can you switch on the mic, please?
Yeah, it's on. Yeah. Thank you सभी को आने के लिए और हमें मौका देने के लिए. Actually, I was in the Home Ministry for the last 9 years, and from the 2014 until August 22. तो मेरा जो साइबर के फील्ड में जो ग्रोथ है वो इसी सेफ्टी एंड ट्रस्ट और सिक्योरिटी के ऊपर ही शुरू हुआ. तो वी स्टार्टेड लर्निंग एंड वी स्टार्टेड डीलिंग दिस सब्जेक्ट्स. शुरू में हम एक सेक्शन में थे, फिर बाद में डिवीज़न बना, फिर काफ़ी बना. तो मुझे लगा कि साइबर स्पेस, साइबर जो इंटरनेट है, अब भी लोग अडॉप्ट कर रहे हैं साथ साथ अपने लाइफ में. अब धीरे धीरे इतना हो गया है कि बड़ा डिफ्रेंशिएट करना बड़ा मुश्किल है कि हम इसके लिए अलग से सोचें या इसके लिए फिजिकल स्पेस के लिए अलग से सोचें. बिकॉज जो कंसर्न है कि सेफ्टी का, सिक्योरिटी का या ट्रस्ट का, वो चाहे म्यूचुअल अपने फिजिकल रिलेशन में करते थे या ऑफलाइन करते थे, आज वर्चुअल भी करते हैं। तो ये हमारे लिए बहुत ज़रूरी है कि दोनों को कैसे हम अपने आप को अडॉप्ट करें या हमारा सिस्टम कैसे अडॉप्ट करें कि ये सेफ्टी एंड सिक्योरिटी एंड ट्रस्ट बना रहे, सो दैट कि एक जो डिपेंडेंसी है या जो यूज है इंटरनेट का, वो एक ग्रोथ में एक लाइन में चल सके। तो मुझे लगा कि ये इसको आने के लिए सबसे बड़ा ज़रूरी है कि देयर शुड बी ट्रांसपेरेंसी होना चाहिए सिस्टम में, रिलायबिलिटी होनी चाहिए। हम जो कम्युनिकेशन करते हैं या पब्लिक करता है, हम का इंडिविजुअल का मतलब सिर्फ पर्सन नहीं है, सिस्टम करता है, गवर्नमेंट करता है, एक सोसाइटी आपस में इंटरेक्शन करती है। तो देयर मस्ट बी ट्रांसपेरेंसी एंड रिलायबिलिटी विद बिन फॉर द ईच कम्युनिकेशन एंड अकाउंटेबिलिटी आल्सो एंड द रिस्पॉन्सिबल बिहेवियर ऑन द इंटरनेट। जैसे हम सोसाइटी में एक जब भी कभी बिहेव करते हैं सोसाइटी में, अपने आप को खड़ा पाते हैं, तो एक बिहेवियर अडॉप्ट करते हैं। अगर वो अडॉप्ट करने के लिए ज़रूरी है कि रेगुलेशन की बात आती है कि अगर हम जो हम बिहेव करें क्या हमारा प्रॉपर है, उससे हमें किसी को हर्ट नहीं हो रहा है या किसी मेरा ही जो राइट है कहीं मेरा डिस्टर्ब नहीं हो रहा है। तो मुझे लगता है कि ये सब बनाने के लिए रिस्पॉन्सिबल इंटरनेट होना चाहिए और आपस में रिलायबिलिटी और ट्रांसपेरेंसी मेंटेन रहनी चाहिए। जी सर।
Associate with these things. When you use the term open, does it mean open standard? Does it also mean open knowledge? Anything? Or what all the dimensions of safe, trusted, and accountability?
Thank you, Deepak. It is very difficult to speak when you have people who have taught you and handled you all these years. So, General Ram to you. General Sahani is here. I can see Zahir. They are the people who actually taught me, and Amit has always been there. But let me put it to in a different perspective when I see as a policy influencer or whatever role I play in my capacity here is to understand what generally will agree is that who is your adversary and the enemy. So it was in the good old days, it was very easy to have a kinetic war when General Sahani was been posted as major or maybe a colonel, because it was very simple. The neighbor was your enemy and that's it. He throws something on you, you throw it back to him. But in 1980s, the rule changed and then these organizations came which started calling themselves to be terrorist organization, and they started changing the rule. Then there are third challenges which we started facing is corporates came in with the same behavior of enemy state or an enemy this thing, because they started playing into the space. With the word which you said is safe, there is a fourth player now which has come and which I and General Sahani have seen lately is individuals. Neither, because it is very easy to deal with a state when you are into war and a kinetic war. Very simple, because you know his behavior, you know his capabilities, their capabilities. Even when it is an organization, it is very easy because you know what that particular organization will do it, and their agendas are fixed, whether it is ISIS or any other organization which is your adversary. But when it is an individual, then defining whether the individual is doing it because he dislikes you, whether he does it because he has a financial interest in you, whether it is motivated because there is a religious angle, or nowadays there is something called as lone wolfers who do it because they want to make a point out of it. Now here the definition of safe has to be adjusted according to this particular part. And then there is also a new breed of challenge which has come to policy maker is these advocates of privacy. And I face this, I'm sure Amit also faces this when you go on televisions. So somebody said, okay, why do you want to know where we are? And I have one small question as an answer to your question, is that if somebody has been kidnapped right now from this room, how will a law enforcement agency know that who amongst you is a kidnapper? He has to listen to everybody's dumb data. Now, the moment he listens, then the challenge is he's compromising your privacy, and the privacy evangelist will come in picture. So the safety have to be seen into that particular aspect also. Now, the last point which I see is you cannot stay in isolation as a country. So while I'm a champion of data sovereignty, and if you've seen my book, which I wrote with the journals and the raw director, so we talked about sovereignty, but it cannot be in isolation and absolute. We will have to be living this, and there are bilaterals and multilaterals which we have already signed. So safety, when we talk about, has to evolve, and safety is not about the people who are sitting in this room who are quite mature to understand. This is about the commitment which we have, General had when he was serving, or the other people who are there in some of the other capacity, to the people who don't understand what is safety on internet. And I think there we have to play then.
Thanks, Vinit. So Amit, you've been working a lot in terms of capacity building for law enforcement, judiciary, etc. And and a lot of work also in terms of, let's say, cyber forensics in that sense. So as Vinit just mentioned, now there, for example, privacy advocates, Vinit just mentioned about privacy advocates. Now, suppose this type of kidnapping had happened even before mobile phones. Also, this type of kidnapping could have happened. And then also the law enforcement would have had to find a way, okay, so without having access to that type of data. So that's one thing. But before that, about this whole thing around how do these stakeholders in your different constituents that you deal with, law enforcement agencies, then of course the prosecutors and the defendants there in the courts, the judiciary, how do they look at these aspects about, let's say, openness, safety, accountability, and trust?
So first of all, thank you so much, Vinit ji, for giving the right context to the problem. And my understanding of privacy is different. Actually, when we think that this platform is open source or this platform is transparent, how do we validate that this is actually transparent or open source? So I think there's no such mechanism available. If we'll say that Bitcoin, for example, all these 4 parameters that you have mentioned, Bitcoin, blockchain based, is open. The ledger is open. Everybody can see that. It is transparent. It is safe because of the highest level of encryption that it offers you. And it accountable because we have the logs available, ledger available, who has transferred money to whom, but still it is protected because nobody's identity is exposed. But are we sure that blockchain is open source? Or is it a conspiracy by someone to regulate it the way they want?
Or is it trustworthy?
Exactly, or it is trustworthy. So there are so many open source platforms. We think we are advocating democratic platform, Web 3.0 and open platform. But are they really open? Who is going to validate that? This is my prime concern, which nobody gives a thought, and they always believe that democracy is the best thing. I believe that too much democracy is also dangerous. Because we eventually start trusting on someone while the guy is doing some sort of conspiracy against us. So this may be a situation. So everything should have, for example, there were situations of loan apps fraud continuously. So we were advocating against loan apps that no such loan app should take your contact list. Why are they taking our contact list and taking pictures and videos? I think for 2-3 months we were just pushing it on televisions, and Vinit ji were also there. Everybody was speaking that we should stop them to take our contact list. At least this thing should happen. Eventually, last week, when certain sent a letter to Google, they have blocked the contact list permission to all the loan apps. It took us 3 months to just do this simple thing, which everybody understands that there is no reason that loan app should.
19 meetings and 17.
Now here's the number. So many meetings and all, and eventually, if we'll start celebrating it, by the time I think thousands and thousands people have lost millions and millions rupees. This would have happened on a single call if there should be some sort of autocracy. No, too much democracy, too much approvals, too much permissions always delay the things. This is my experience of taking things forward when we want to help somebody. So I think, and then another aspects of security, I think Sir has mentioned about encryption. So the biggest challenge that I see in future is of quantum attacks. And if you know, last week, China has claimed that they have cracked RSA 204-bit encryption through 114-qubit quantum computers. Now, RSA 204-bit encryption is the backbone behind all the banking industry. Is behind debit card encryption, credit card encryption, VPN, login password, IDEM server encryption. So RSA 204-bit is the entire backbone of the security behind banks. Now this is broken. All the banks are under panic situation. They want to move to secure encryption standards, which is safe against quantum attacks. Since last 7 years, NIST have been doing some research with lots of researchers just to find out some encryption method which could sustain quantum attacks. They identified 2. Crystal Kyber and crystal dilithium. And then they started promoting it that we should move to crystal Kyber, we should move to crystal dilithium, and banks and everybody was pumping heavy money just to migrate from RSA to crystal Kyber and crystal dilithium. Just 4 days before, I got a news again from China that they have cracked crystal fiber using AI. Now, to whom we should believe on, first of all, who was testing these crystal fiber algorithms? And body like NIST, they were claiming this is quantum safe. And they have invested billions and billions of dollars. So my point is that we are trusting on somebody, and then because they are open, they are community-based organizations. But are they really doing justice with our expectations? This is my prime concern when we are thinking about future security. Thank you.
Okay. So what are the other things, let's say, apart from these four attributes, openness, safety, trusted, and accountable? Is there something missing in this framework within the cyberspace? या इसके अलावा कुछ और होना चाहिए? ये चार चीजें तो होनी चाहिए, ठीक है. ओपननेस सबसे पूछ रहा हूँ. ओपननेस, सेफ्टी, ट्रस्ट, अकाउंटेबिलिटी, ठीक है, हमने मान लिया चार चीजें होनी चाहिए. इसके अलावा कोई और चीज है जो होनी चाहिए?
मैं तो सर इनके अगेंस्ट बोला हूँ पूरा. मैं तो टू मच ओपननेस के अगेंस्ट हूँ. एक्चुअली टू मच ओपननेस विल ऑलवेज क्रिएट चैलेंजेस फॉर सिक्योरिटी. कुछ चीजें रेगुलेटेड भी होनी चाहिए. हमें एक बैलेंस क्रिएट करना ही होगा.
लेकिन इसके अलावा कोई ऐसी चीज है जो इसमें इन चारों के अलावा भी है, तो ये बताओ.
ऐसे ऑल ऑफ ए सडन सी, पहली चीज, आई बिलीव दैट टेक्नोलॉजी कैन बी काउंटर्ड थ्रू टेक्नोलॉजी. एंड if we'll make everything too open, see, China is safe, protected because they are not too much open. They are not even giving their data out, and this is their biggest strength today. If everybody will start believing in openness, everybody will be vulnerable.
Okay.
So I think Vinit sir can add more on that because he's on the right side of the government. But this is my personal view.
All right. Yeah. Vinit.
See, the people will call me conservative and probably from the old school. But that blame, I think General Sahani and I always carried, that we'll have to be with that reasonable restrictions have to be there. Okay. I'll give you one example that privacy cannot be an absolute in the country when you are governed by law and order. And I'll also cross this limit of law and order because generally otherwise we all in this circle limit to this. But I'll give an excellent case study is that people in the earlier regimes also were good and sincere. So I don't want to get into that zone of them. They were sincere. Availability of data was not current, and so as the data was not current, the planning was also absolute, and by the time the implementation is to happen, it is to be. Now if you see in the last few years, let us take an example of technologically enabled benefits which have been transferred, and PDS, 80 crore people to be given food. You have to give it, they are your brothers. What was the best part of it is that Aadhaar enabled elimination of ghost benefits. Now the burden on the treasury was on the ghost. So that nobody has problem when you give it to the real needy who is there. You won't mind, I won't mind, and nobody will mind with a sensible mind. But when it's ghost, and technology enables that. So there, somebody has to declare that I am eligible, and that data has to be read by somebody. Now you cannot put in that so-called Western thought of privacy that I will not tell that I am poor, but yet you give me the benefits. Number two, the benefits of the technology can be seen from another part also if you see. How did it go? Healthcare was a big budget. Now with influence of this thing, the data has been collected and Ayushman has been decimating down. When you decimate Ayushman, you have to declare that you are ill. When you declare that you are ill, there will be some medical checks which will happen through the electronic pharmacy, and it will happen, what will happen to your health data. Now we can debate this, the head data should not go out, should be going out, whether it can be used to extrapolate certain researchers, who will be the owner of the researcher, whether the patent should have some element of cash transfer to the person who has been part of this. Now these are a wider discussion in which I think I am not capable to participate, nor are the other people who are my colleagues who are elected. That's why we are here. But one thing I would like to comment, which is not an answer to your query, which I wanted to communicate this way. Democracy is about making legislature through law, through the legislator who has been elected, not through the courts. Case studies. So when I heard the earlier panel, and every time I hear, I put to Swami case in this case, these are not good, healthy way of coming out of case laws, legislature. Because legislature, why does it take time? Now the second question which comes out of from here is, why does it take time to have an act being enacted in a country like us? Because the ears are open. Ears are open and they allow you to speak about this. So probably, sir, here, this is a very wider discussion. A full day is needed, not 2 minutes.
Okay. Shailendra.
Security or privacy मेरा तो 8-9 सालों का यही डिस्कशन होता रहा है।
हाँ।
तो आई विल नॉट गो, बहुत इसमें डीप में नहीं जाऊँगा, बिकॉज कौन से ऐप चलने थे, बेसिकली मैं यही सब्जेक्ट डील करता था। लेकिन जो इसके अलावा की बात करते हैं सर, इसके अलावा जो मैं कहता हूँ, मेरा अपना पर्सनल व्यू है, इंटरनेट इज़ फॉर यूजर्स, पब्लिक के लिए, हम सबके लिए, ठीक है। पहला तो ज़रूरी है कि जो इंटरनेट यूज कर रहा है, जो साइबर स्पेस यूज कर रहा है, ही शुड गेट द फ्री एंड फेयर प्लेटफॉर्म, बिना किसी डर के, बिना किसी वजह के वो अपनी इस प्लेटफॉर्म को, इस जो मतलब एक बड़ी करामाती दुनिया है, वर्चुअल वर्ल्ड है, इसको इस्तेमाल करें। हमें ऐसा मतलब इकोसिस्टम या एनवायरनमेंट क्रिएट करने की ज़रूरत है। हम क्यों हर चीज़ को रेगुलेट करने की तरफ जाना चाहते हैं? और डिजिटल वर्ल्ड इतना बड़ा है, इतना आप सोच भी नहीं सकते कि कब क्या होने वाला है। बॉर्डरलेस है, एनोनिमिटी है, सामने वाला कौन है, कैसे नहीं है। जस्ट हम जो रेगुलेटर हैं, हमें ये होना चाहिए कि पहला कि पीपल शुड बी एबल टू यूज द इंटरनेट विथ एज पर देयर चॉइस, बट साइमल्टेनियसली जो मिसयूजर है, जो जनरली इस प्लेटफॉर्म का मिसयूज करता है, ही शुड बी पनिश्ड, ही शुड बी ब्रॉट इन द डोमेन ऑफ द लॉ, कि कैसे उनको रोकना है, कैसे नहीं करना है। क्योंकि जब तक हम इसको, और एक क्वेश्चन उठा था बीच में, मैं जब वहाँ पर था कि अब डीप है टेक्नोलॉजी, मगर टेक्नोलॉजी को आप रेगुलेट नहीं कर सकते, न करना भी नहीं चाहिए। आप कितनी टेक्नोलॉजी, क्योंकि हम जो रिसर्च करता है आदमी, जो साइंटिस्ट करते हैं, जो भी करते हैं, नहीं अडॉप्टेबिलिटी के लिए, अपनी लाइफ को एक सिंपल AIG बनाने के लिए, अगर हम टेक्नोलॉजी को सोचो नहीं ये ख़राब है, ये इनक्रिप्शन ख़राब है, क्योंकि इनक्रिप्शन ठीक है, इनक्रिप्शन है, आपको हमें चैलेंजेस था, लॉ इन्फोर्समेंट एजेंसी चैलेंजेस कि हमें मिलता नहीं था जो भी चीज़ें हैं, बट साइमल्टेनियसली हम भी वही व्हाट्सएप यूज करते हैं, क्यों? टू प्रोटेक्ट आवर प्राइवेसी। हमारा मतलब एफर्ट होना चाहिए हाउ टू प्रोटेक्ट आवर प्राइवेसी, पीपल्स प्राइवेसी, साथ में कैसे अपने नेशनल सिक्योरिटी कंसर्न को एड्रेस करें, क्योंकि जब तक नेशन नहीं रहेगा तो फिर प्राइवेसी भी काम नहीं आएगी। तो वो होता है कि जो बैलेंस्ड व्यू लेना पड़ता है, तो हमें उस माइंडसेट से सोचना पड़ेगा, जो भी रेगुलेशन बनाना पड़ेगा, जो भी चीज़ें हम करते हैं, कि हाँ कैसे हम चीज़ों को बैलेंस करते हैं। इट इज़ बेसिकली ड्यूटी ऑफ द रेगुलेटर्स। यहाँ तक कि रेगुलेटर क्यों, सरकार ही क्यों, हम सबकी है, चाहे वो पब्लिक हो, चाहे यूजर हो, चाहे इंडस्ट्री हो, कि हाउ टू मेक दिस प्लेटफॉर्म सेफ एंड सिक्योर और लोग पब्लिकली यूज कर सकें। जी सर।
ओके, सो जब भी हम लोग इसमें देख रहे हैं, जैसे अभी विनीत ने भी बोला कि लॉ बनने में इतना प्रोसेस होता है, और बिकॉज आवर ईयर्स आर ओपन एंड दैट्स फाइन, but at the same time, I mean, with due respect, I would also say that it's also not a very good practice to have laws passed without any debate or discussion in the House, is also, which also happens, and it's nothing new which is happening now. It's been happening even earlier. So for example, 2008 amendments, that they had come 3 weeks after the Mumbai attack on 26th November. So it was on 22nd and 23rd December, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, without any debate or discussion, the bills just got introduced and they got passed, and of course people were just going for Christmas holidays thereafter. But that's again a fact that a lot of times what happens, yes, there's a lot of deliberation in the committees and others, but once it comes in the House itself, after that, at times, we do not see sufficient debate or discussion on many of the legislations. I'm not saying all the cases, but yes, it does happen at times now. Second thing is, you mentioned about the courts laying law. I mean, that's again a jurisprudence which has well established, and again, not just unique to India. It's been going on for ages all over around the common law countries, that yes, the courts keep on, because law is written in a certain form, and depending on the situation, the courts keep on sort of reinterpreting, and sometimes creating new precedences, sometimes, of course, falling back to the old precedents. And that is just a process of the law, which anyway keeps happening. But one thing that I would like all of you to ask now is this, that whatever we are talking about, this new Digital India Act, there's also, the Prime Minister had mentioned about a national cybersecurity policy on 15th of August, a few years back, that there's a new national cybersecurity policy which will be coming out. We already had national, the non-personal data framework We also have, last year, the government came up with its own revised data sharing framework in February last year. And then, of course, we have the data protection bill, we have the telecom bill, as of now, both drafts only. So let's see as and when they get introduced in the parliament. So we have a myriad of these different legislations. And they are not just legislation. Some of them are proposed legislation. Some of them are, let's say, in the realm of just executive policies. So, for example, let's say National Cybersecurity Policy, जो 3 July 2013 में आई थी, या अब जो जब आएगी, या e-govern, या जो अभी हमारा NPD framework, those type of things. So, what should be the framework through which, like in the earlier discussion, there was this thing that, okay, there should be these building blocks. So how they should sort of fit with each other, and what is the institutional mechanism that should be there. So one suggestion, of course, was there that MATI should become more like a coordinator for all these things, whereas expertise might lie elsewhere. तो उसके बारे में क्या विचार है आप लोगों का? बोलो विनीत, स्टार्ट करते हैं आपसे.
So it is again very difficult when you have people who have taught you to speak, but I'll see. Yes, I agree with the earlier panel that there has to be a nodal agency when you have a meta framework of the frameworks. And one of the department which was mentioned in the earlier, this thing is also right. But if I go on to this 5G and the data would travel over sensors, where I would be requiring geospatial stuff. The moment geospatial will come, then Surveyor General will also come in picture. Then I'll also
Department
have
of Space.
the ISRO guys would come in. So it is very difficult to tell you in a one single brush that they are the right people to speak about. So this debate will go on, and that is the essence of civilization and the democracy, where we'll have to evolve every time the technology comes in. So that is one particular part. Number two, whether it should be MATI or whether it should be any other department, I'll leave it to the GOM when it comes out, because speaking right now, anything on the record will be, I'll be jobless. So, but yes, this challenge will be there. Who should be the right person? And right now, what I see, MATI has to be the driver in this particular part. And to answer one part where you said where the regulations are not been discussed, yes, it has been done. It's like your mother, when you go home, many times she discusses things with you, and sometimes she gets a can and said, follow it, Deepak, and that's the way it happens.
All right. Amit?
Sir, first of all, I was trying to create a sentence using your 4 keywords: safe, open, trust, and accountable, right? And I'm trying to inculcate all this in one such sentence, that you will not be safe if you are open.
If you are too open.
If you are too open, because your surroundings are not trustworthy and system is not accountable.
Okay. All right.
So that is the real challenge. कि आप घर का दरवाजा खोल के क्यों नहीं जाओगे? भाई ओपन है, सेफ फील कीजिए आप. लेकिन जो फैक्ट है सब जानते हैं. तो मेरे ख्याल से टू मच ओपननेस इज ऑलवेज ए चैलेंज. अदरवाइज सर ये नहीं कहते कि मैं व्हाट्सएप को क्यों सेफ फील करता हूँ, क्योंकि व्हाट्सएप ओपन नहीं है, बिकॉज व्हाट्सएप ने सब कुछ प्राइवेट कर रखा है. सो वी नीड टू फर्स्ट एक्सेप्ट दिस फैक्ट दैट ओपन एंड सेफ आर टू polar apart things, contradictory things. Yes, we always want it to happen because of our democratic nature, but there are always such boundaries. Second, as you mentioned, that there are too many policies and policies will keep coming, but there are few things that we surely need in our framework. First of all, and I keep on recommending such things, we should definitely have our own Play Store kind of thing. Because whether it is Google Play Store, whether it is Apple App Store, whenever we want an application to be taken down or to be restricted or regulated or removed or sort of seeking data or whatever, we have to go through so many channels, and it takes time, and sometimes this delay is dangerous. So we should have, and especially for financial applications and all, Paytm has been struggling a lot to keep their application up on Google Play Store when they were actually coming up with their IPO, and there were some tussle going on. So these kind of issues were always happening. So what should we do? We should have our own indigenous app store, and the Indian people should be allowed to install applications only from that app store. That will solve many such security challenges and issues. And this should be part of our security framework. That whenever we want something to get from external world, it should come through some gateway. It cannot be without gateway. Otherwise, it will always be a challenge for law enforcement agencies to.
It should not be waterfall.
Yeah, it should not be like coming from everywhere. We think that we have banned 150 Chinese applications, and you can see that all these applications are still available. They are available with different names. TikTok is available with the Tiki. Share It is available with the Share Karo. And everywhere. A Cam scanner is available with some other. So they have come up with different names on Play Store again. And we can't do anything because there are 10 crores plus downloads with each and every app. And they don't have Indian offices. They don't have grievance officer, nodal officer, compliance officer, nobody. And they are running their business from India. So I think these kind of challenges can be solved only if we'll have our own app store. This is first such a recommendation that we should allow.
What else?
Second thing, that if we are pushing everyone to move to blockchain and all, I think that is also not a good idea. Because we cannot leave everything on technology unless until we understand this technology well. Government is already pushing quantum. We have just launched, I think, day before yesterday, National Quantum Mission. Indian government has invested close to $1 billion, which is fourth largest investment in the world. Total quantum का investment पता है कितना है world में? $30 billion. 30. और हम चौथे largest हैं. China, US, Canada and India. US का 1.3 है, कनाडा का 1.3 बिलियन डॉलर है, इंडिया का $1 बिलियन है. आपको पता है चाइना का कितना है? $15 बिलियन. मतलब टोटल $30 बिलियन में 50% सिर्फ चाइना इन्वेस्ट कर रहा है क्वांटम में, एंड दे बिलीव सो मच ऑन क्वांटम दैट दे विल बी लीडिंग द नेक्स्ट डिकेड बिकॉज ऑफ क्वांटम. हमारी पॉपुलेशन नंबर 1 हो चुकी है 2 दिन पहले और विद वन मतलब minuscule investment, we are actually eyeing big, and which is important because I truly believe that next decade will go for quantum. AI के बाद जो अगला झटका में मिलने वाला है वो क्वांटम से मिलेगा. सारे सिक्योरिटी चैलेंजेस या सारे रेगुलेटरी चैलेंजेस और प्रोसेस चैलेंजेस क्वांटम की वजह से होंगे. और उसका हमें अभी तक प्रॉपर अंदाजा नहीं है. सो आई थिंक वी शुड स्टार्ट वर्किंग समथिंग टू put this in our security framework. How are we going to tackle quantum challenges in future? Do we have good investment? So I think many of such organizations can take the initiatives and can do something in this. So these two small recommendations for our security framework if we are going up with new strategy.
Thank you. Thanks, Amit. And now let's hear from the audience here. Do you have any brief comments, questions? Anybody? Otherwise, we can also ask questions to you. Don't worry. Yeah.
Sir, I'm Commander Aditya Verma from the Navy. A very important point brought out by you.
Can you please come to the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is regarding post-quantum ready encryption. The DIA should definitely be looking at ways and means of encouraging organizations, whether in the government or outside, to move to post-quantum ready encryption, sir. I would like to hear views on that, sir.
Absolutely. So I think that is something which we need to come up with our own indigenous investment also. Because if we'll rely too much on other standards, we'll always be vulnerable. I have already given an example that NIST has come up with 2 such encryption methods. Those are quantum safe. But one of them has been cracked by China recently using AI. Because we are not doing our own research to come up with our own indigenous solution. We'll have some proprietary encryption methods. Probably we can tackle any such kind of challenges in future, which is really required at this time when everybody is working on their own encryption methods. Too much openness, too much research which is collaborative creates issues, especially for encryption. And that's why if you are from defense and you know that defense encryption standards are always proprietary. They'll never be open. For our EVM, even the cable that we use to collect the data is proprietary. We cannot just use USB or UART for that. So this is something which we need to bring as a culture. Otherwise, there will be challenges in future. You are right. You are absolutely right. For post-quantum, we need to come up with our own standards.
Okay. Excuse me, one second. Let's come to another question. We'll come back to you later. Yeah.
So this is Lieutenant Colonel Praveen Kumar from Army. Basically, this question is to Mr. Vinit. As government is collecting data regarding Aadhaar and other things to distribute the ration and other things. But as we are talking about the trust, we saw that AIMS server was hacked and so much of data was compromised. So what do you have to say about this? Unless we don't build that trust network, we don't have people actively sharing their data.
So this chicken and egg story will go on. We will go on building infrastructure which is protecting us, and at the same time we will have debates in these kind of rooms which will enlighten the government, and also we'll have to face the challenges. Not only AIMS. I don't want to shy out from the Bangalore experiment, and I don't know whether you are aware of this experiment. So we will have the challenges. Yes, let me tell you one thing. The government is aware, and this has to be done. There is no other third word to this particular part.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when people talk about this whole thing about cyber safety, cyber awareness, etc. So actually, health itself is a good place to start with in a different manner. I'm saying in terms of some lessons. So typically, health के लिए क्या बोला जाता है? Pre and postnatal vaccinations, basic hygiene, and good nutrition. It doesn't mean कि उसके बाद आप बीमार नहीं हो गए. But what it implies is that if you take care of these things, these three basic things, by and large, you'll be safe, by and large. And even when something goes wrong, you'll have a higher chances of a quicker and better and faster and efficient recovery. So same type of things if you think in terms of, let's say, in the cyber domain. So keeping your software systems, etc. updated. That's about vaccination aspect. Taking care of things like antivirus or firewalls, etc. in terms of basic hygiene. And nutrition is in terms of having good practices in terms of usage. So if you just apply your mind like that, you could also think about this.
I just take 30 seconds because I got encouraged by his answer. Your kernel, you said your kernel, right?
Yeah.
So one more thing I'll tell you, we'll have to invest a lot of money and resources in non-kinetic also. We have been always focused till 5-6 years back in kinetic. And I'll give you two examples and you will be the appropriate to answer this. The narrative, we actually won the battle there if you see when the Air Force strike that particular part. But we lost the war because the narration war was lost. We did not hit Balakot, I think. If this is not on the record. We went to Jabbar Top, right? And they started the Balakot story and we fall flat. So, at the same time, if you remember, there is a flying machine which was been down. We actually shot down a plane. What is it? It was F-16. It's a very big thing when you have shot down F-16 with Bison. We could not build that narration that we have shot it down, right? But Americans were very quick to change the narration. So AIMS is a very small thing in that context. If you see, what we'll have to do is while we ask the trust from the establishment, we have to build this non-kinetic narrative from our side. You and I are responsible, but the part maybe the people in the room may not be responsible with that particular thing. We have to tell people that we have shot down F-16 and their machines and there are thousands of examples I can give you where the entire enterprise in US or in Western world have collapsed and the data has been threatened. I don't want to talk about the credit card companies or all this particular part. We have one challenge inbuilt, and this is not to you, Colonel, this is to everybody who is there. We feel if something goes wrong, small thing goes wrong, we have lost the war. And whereas we overlook the bigger mistakes and the bigger collapses there. So as I answered in my first part, we are responsible, we will take care of it. In the second part is, we also have to be careful about the narration which has been built. Can I give one non-logical answer? 10 seconds if you have.
Maybe later. So for example, a few years back when we had this major attack on Target, the big retailer in the US, where millions of customer data had been breached. The attack was not through the conventional hacking or anything like that. It was through their HVAC systems. So the person was the company that had set up the heating, AC, and ventilation system. So it was through that. And of course, in a lighter vein, a lot of people said, why was Target a target? Because it was named Target. Okay. So that was the situation. Anybody else? Any question? Yeah, over there.
Thank you, sir. I'm Archit from CCG. Just a quick question about the various scholars have written about balkanization of internet or splinternet or fragmentation of internet. So my specific question is to Mr. Amit Dubey about the App Store example that you discussed right now. Don't you think that would completely change the way the internet is conceptualized and divide internet into the geopolitical boundaries that the real world exists in?
Okay.
Thank you. So there are two narratives going on internet. One towards Web 3.0 and another towards secure. I think these two are fall apart. When I recommended Play Store, it's because we want to be secure in India. We want things to be regulated through our jurisdictions and laws. But if you go with Web 3.0 concept, everything is democrated, everything is everywhere. But my problem is that how should I trust that openness? What is the regulatory framework which helps me to trust that? Whether this is a conspiracy theory. People say that Bitcoin is a conspiracy theory. There are 6-7 companies you can search on Google and you will find those have created Bitcoin. And we trust Bitcoin. But if suppose tomorrow we find that this is a conspiracy theory, then we were cheated. So too much openness, too much trusting others will always have a challenge for our own democracy. And that's why we want few things to be under our control. I'll not allow everything to be moved to Web 3.0. And that's what you just said, that vulcanization of apps coming out from different places. Everybody is developing different programming languages, different standards, strategies. I think it has to come through one gateway. And once we'll build that Play Store gateway that, okay, Indian government will approve it, then anybody can use it. We can create a safe environment and trustworthy environment also for sure. That's my recommendation, my personal recommendation.
Okay. Somebody had a question there. Yeah, please.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Shruti from The Dialogue. So my specific question was with respect to technology-facilitated gender-based violence. Now we are talking about cybersecurity issues and the issues of safety in general on the internet. TFGBV has been reported by UN and a number of other organizations as one of the most important threats that's coming up. And right now when we see the IT Act does not specifically deal with this, then we are coming up with solutions, and people have been speaking that there is need for more graded responsibility of all the stakeholders, because a law in itself and just the government cannot solve the problem. So how the Digital India Act can institutionalize greater sharing of responsibility between different stakeholders, be it not just the government or the platforms, also legal aid NGOs, caregivers, and what sort of a framework can we look at? There are many countries looking at these kind of practices. Is there something that we can learn from other jurisdictions?
Thanks, Shruti. So in fact, one of the reasons that a lot of studies have found about gender digital divide in terms of access is one of the reasons is this also, that even in many cases it is not so much a challenge in terms of access or affordability, but it is these type of gender-based violences which has been facilitated by technology and at times even amplified, that can come in the play. So let me ask Shailendra first and then Amit on this issue.
About the Digital India.
हाँ नहीं, श्रुति का बेसिकली ये कहना है कि जो बहुत बार जैसे हमने देखा है कि वैसे तो सभी को दिक्कत है, लेकिन जैसे स्त्रियों को जो वो जो है उस हिसाब से बहुत ज़्यादा उनको टारगेट किया जाता है, हरास किया जाता है स्पेसिफिकली। ऐसा नहीं कि औरों को भी नहीं किया जाता, औरों को भी किया जाता है। और उसके बारे में डिजिटल इंडिया एक्ट या इस प्रकार के जो और हमारे नई पॉलिसीज़ या लॉ बनाएंगे, उनमें क्या करना चाहिए उनको एड्रेस करने के लिए?
कोई भी साइबर एक्टिविटीज,
माइक ऑन कर देंगे प्लीज।
यू कैन नॉट रेगुलेट इन ए एक्ट ओनली, जब तक कि इन्वॉल्वमेंट ऑफ एवरी स्टेक होल्डर, चाहे सिविल सोसाइटीज है, चाहे गवर्नमेंट है, चाहे कुछ भी हो, चाहे जो डेवलपर्स हैं, जब तक एक फोरम में नहीं आएगा। अब क्योंकि ये तो डायनेमिक है, नए नए चैलेंजेस आते रहेंगे। हाउ कुल, जैसे एक एग्जांपल देता हूँ कि IT एक्ट 2000 की एक उसमें होता कि ये साइबर क्राइम और बड़ा स्पेसिफिक सब्जेक्ट है, बड़ा स्पेशल सब्जेक्ट है। द प्रोविजन है फॉर द इन्वेस्टिगेशन ऑफ एनी साइबर क्राइम कैन बी डन बाय द ओनली इंस्पेक्टर लेवल ऑफिसर। आज की तारीख में हम होम मिनिस्ट्री वी हैव ट्राइड मैनी टाइम टू चेंज इट बिकॉज इट इज सब बैठे हैं तो ये मेरे तो 8 साल हो गए, मैं चेंज नहीं करवा पाया। क्यों? क्योंकि एक हम ठप्पा लगा के बैठ जाते हैं कि नहीं नहीं इसी में कवर होगा। यू कैन नॉट एड्रेस एवरी चैलेंजेस, लाइक जैसे भी चीज़ें होती है तो सभी को आना पड़ेगा। डायनेमिक टेक्नोलॉजी है, डायनेमिक एनवायरनमेंट है, डायनेमिक थ्रेट है, तो रेगुलेशन भी डायनेमिक होना चाहिए। आज ऐसा अगर हम सोचते हैं कि डिजिटल एक्ट अलग, क्या डिजिटल एक्ट? आज की हमारी 50% लाइफ जो है इट इज़ विद द डिजिटल ओनली। जो हम चाहे हम गाड़ी चला रहे हैं, आजकल ऑटोमेटेड गाड़ियां चल रही हैं, तो क्या आप सोचते हो कि डिजिटल इंडिया एक्ट में कवर करेगा? डिजिटल इंडिया एक्ट शुड एड्रेस ओनली द टेक्नोलॉजी। जैसे तो 2000 का था, इट वाज एड्रेसिंग व्हाट इज द डिजिटल सिग्नेचर, व्हाट इज द डिजिटल एविडेंस। अब नई टेक्नोलॉजी है तो व्हाट इज द ब्लॉकचेन, व्हाट इज द क्रिप्टो, व्हाट इज द ऑनलाइन गेमिंग, ये सब डिफाइन कर दीजिए। हाउ टू डू इट, तो कंसर्न डिपार्टमेंट है, जैसे कंज्यूमर अफेयर्स है, वुमेन सेफ्टी का डिपार्टमेंट, दे शुड डू। उन्हें होना चाहिए कि उनका टेक्नोलॉजिकली, बिकॉज यू कैन नॉट।
शैलेंद्र जी, अब जरा अमित की और सुन लेते हैं। हाँ,
देखिए, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड द मोटिवेशन ऑफ द क्रिमिनल्स इफ दे आर टारगेटिंग गर्ल्स, women, and that's why we have a special provision on I4C website to file a complaint anonymously, especially for women and children, and that provision has come up after such kind of incidents. But then people have started misusing that. Also, people just send an anonymous complaint about anybody, and he started getting calls from police and got threatened. So everything has this own way of utilization. I think that is the real challenge that we see when we come up with the gender-based laws. And it happens in IPC laws also. You have seen there were laws against dowry, there were laws against a particular caste and something. But it was misused also. So these kind of challenges, do we want to happen in digital world also, when we are thinking futuristic, where we are allowing everybody to be equal, and then we want a specific law for gender, will have their own consequences. That we need to understand first of all, whether we are okay with that. 354D stalking, it was an IPC, but is used in digital world also. If somebody is stalking, so we are using same law for digital world. Then if you consider entire cybercrime gamut that is happening today, 66CDE, identity theft, impersonation, I think it is with everyone, every gender. So there is nothing, and people, those are male, and if they are threatened and they are getting issues, because if they are threatened, especially the sextortion cases I am referring, they are mostly targeted, and we have 106 police officers from UP, those who are actually became victim. How are you going to handle that situation? Because anybody can use it to even get their suspension eventually. So they are so much threatened that their jobs are at stake. So creating law is simple, but then getting justice difficult. Whether it will start helping someone or whether it will start helping criminals. So sometimes creating law will also help criminals. So I think we need to think a lot. We need some open brainstorming around it. You have raised a very good point. But at this point, I'll not recommend any gender-specific law, especially in digital world. I'll give some special provision, but no specific law or power which is only for a particular gender.
Okay. So anybody else? Yeah.
So my question is specifically for Amit sir. You mentioned you also had a discussion with somebody about having a separate Play Store. So my question was, India is already part of CCAOI, Common Criteria Recognition Agreement. So that agreement was specifically for, common certification of IT products and services. Why not leverage something like that? Because we have laboratories in India, we have a authority in India. Why not leverage those frameworks instead of, coming up with a new Play Store, new set of regulations?
No, we can definitely leverage. See, all these bodies are there to help us. But see, whenever we come up with any such kind of body or laws, in fact, अभी लास्ट 3 साल से आपने देखा हर साल कुछ नई गाइडलाइंस आ रही हैं। 19 में आई, 20 में आई, 21 में आई, 22 में आई, अब 23 में भी आई। और जो गाइडलाइन आई वो कितनी इम्प्लीमेंट हुई ये भी देखा हमने। फॉर 72 आवर्स का नोटिस है कि हम लॉ एनफोर्समेंट 91 CRPC का नोटिस भेजता है, इन्फॉर्मेशन आनी चाहिए। मैं अभी भी बोल रहा हूँ, मैं डेली पुलिस की ट्रेनिंग लेता हूँ, किसी को नहीं आता। तो ये रियलिटीज़ हैं। तो कई बार क्या होता है कि हमें इतना टाइट करना पड़ेगा कि कुछ तो रिजल्ट हो, सिर्फ लॉ बनाने से फर्क नहीं पड़ रहा है। दैट इज दिस द रियल ग्राउंड चैलेंज एंड क्राइम्स आर इंक्रीज लाइक एनीथिंग। जनरल पंत वाज देयर इन लास्ट यस्टरडे, वी वर इन अ इवेंट एंड ही मेंशन 3-4 महीने पहले हमारी एक मीटिंग हुई वहाँ पर, एंड ही मेंशन कि 2000 क्राइम्स पर डे I4C पर रजिस्टर हो रहे हैं, जो साइबर क्राइम का पोर्टल है। 3 महीने पहले की बात है। आज बोल रहे हैं कि 4500 थे, कल का डेटा बता रहा हूँ। आप देख रहे हो 3 महीने में डबल से ज़्यादा हो गया है, और 72 आवर्स में डेटा नहीं आता वहाँ से। कैसे सॉल्व करेंगे? सो आई थिंक अभी टाइम वो आ गया है कि अब हम किसी थर्ड पार्टी बॉडीज़ को हेल्प लेकर लेवरेज करने की बजाय वी शुड टेक ऑटोक्रेटिक डिसीजन, हमारा प्ले स्टोर हो, हम रेगुलेट करेंगे, वो आ गया टाइम, ताकि हम इसको कंट्रोल कर लें। मैंने हाथ से निकल जाएगा, ये 4,000 का 40,000 होते हैं, टाइम नहीं लगेगा मुझे, मतलब आई एम मोर वरीड फॉर दैट, एंड पीपल आर लूजिंग मनी, पीपल आर लूजिंग रेपुटेशन, एवरीथिंग.
Okay, so two things just wanted to mention on this. One, Shailendra mentioned कि अभी IT Act में बोला inspector. You know what the original provision was in 2000? It was DSP, but IT Bill 99 actually had the term inspector, and it became DSP at that time in 2000 because Devang Mehta from NASCOM, he had sort of said that at that point of time, again, we also have to think in terms of the time and space. So at that point of time, when we had just not even 1 lakh, probably just about 1 lakh or so internet users in the country, he had said that at this point of time, we should have a senior level officer to be in charge of these investigations. So that's how it was. So from inspector in the bill, it became DSP in the law. And again, it became inspector, and now, of course, he wants to bring it down to further levels. The second thing, in terms of CCRA, I know about CCRA, been involved in that, and it's been almost a decade since we signed CCRA. CCRA, to the best of my knowledge, does not do validation and testing of the apps. It does many other things. It does for a lot of hardware. It does testing for a lot of software. And yes, we should adopt those things. But to the best of my knowledge, CCRA does not do apps as of now. Okay, so I'm not aware that if CCRA does any apps testing, etc. So with this, we'll conclude this particular session, and let me just hand it over back to Amrita and Rahul for further announcements.